My family laughed cruelly while I lived in a van. Mom said, "Some people just don't deserve better than the streets." Dad added, "Failures end up where they belong." Sister agreed, "Finally learning your real worth. Now I own a beautiful house, on my own hard work." Then they came back, uninvited and demanding. "It's perfect for your sister's growing family," they said boldly. Mom added, "She needs this space more than a single person." I smiled sweetly and called the police. My name is Elena, and at 25, I thought I had everything figured out. I was working as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm, living in a modest apartment, and slowly building my savings. Then the company downsized, and I found myself unemployed with barely enough in my bank account to cover 2 months of rent. When I called my parents, Harold and Marjorie, asking for temporary help, I expected at least some sympathy. Instead, I got a harsh reality check that would forever change how I viewed my family. "Elena, sweetheart," my mother Marjorie said over the phone, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "maybe this is exactly what you need. Some people just don't deserve better than the streets. It might teach you some humility." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in my nearly empty apartment, holding the phone with shaking hands, wondering if I'd heard her correctly. "Mom, I'm not asking for money," I managed to say. "I just need a place to stay for a few weeks while I find another job. I've been applying everywhere." "Oh, Elena," she sighed dramatically. "You've always been so unrealistic about your capabilities. Maybe living rough for a while will help you understand your actual worth in this world." When I called my father Harold, hoping for a different response, he was even more brutal. "Failures end up where they belong," he said matter-of-factly. "I've been telling you for years that this artsy graphic design nonsense wouldn't lead anywhere stable. Maybe some time on the streets will motivate you to pursue something more practical." The conversation with my sister Tessa was the final nail in the coffin. Tessa, who was 28 and had always been the golden child, laughed when I explained my situation. "Finally learning your real worth, huh?" she said with genuine amusement. "I mean, I'm not surprised. You've always been the family disappointment. At least now you're living up to expectations." I hung up the phone and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My family had just told me, in no uncertain terms, that I deserved to be homeless. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had written me off as a failure who belonged on the streets. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let their words define me. I was going to prove them wrong, no matter what it took. I sold everything I owned except for the essentials and used the money to buy a used van. It wasn't pretty, a 2008 Ford Transit with 200,000 miles on it and a few rust spots, but it was mine. I spent the next week converting it into a livable space, installing a small bed, some storage, and basic amenities. It wasn't glamorous, but it was shelter, and it gave me the freedom to move around the city looking for work. The first few months were incredibly difficult. I showered at the gym, did my laundry at laundromats, and worked odd jobs to survive. I freelanced whenever I could, taking on small design projects for local businesses. I parked in different locations each night, constantly worried about being discovered or asked to move. During this time, I kept minimal contact with my family. They would occasionally call, usually to check if I had learned my lesson yet. Each conversation was a reminder of their cruelty, but it also fueled my determination. I screenshotted every harsh text message and saved every voicemail where they mocked my situation. One particularly painful memory was when Tessa called me on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was parked outside a 24-hour diner, trying to use their Wi-Fi to work on a project. "So, how's van life treating you?" she asked, and I could hear her laughing with friends in the background. "Mom and Dad were just telling us about their latest conversation with you. They said you're still living in that tin can on wheels." "I'm doing fine, Tessa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, come on, Elena. You don't have to pretend with me. We all know you're probably regretting not taking that job at the call center I mentioned. But hey, at least you're getting the full homeless experience, right? That's got to be worth something." I could hear her friends laughing harder in the background, and I realized she had me on speakerphone. They were all being entertained by my misery. "I have to go," I said. Wait, Tessa said, still giggling. "Before you go, Mom wanted me to tell you that she drove by the area where you said you park sometimes. She said she saw a van that might be yours and took a picture to show her friends. She's been telling everyone about her daughter who chose to live like a vagrant instead of getting a real job." That night, I cried myself to sleep in the back of my van. But when I woke up the next morning, something had shifted inside me. The humiliation had transformed into pure, burning determination. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to thrive. I started taking on more challenging freelance projects, often working 16-hour days. I networked relentlessly, attended every free professional event I could find, and slowly began building a reputation for exceptional work. I lived on instant noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, saving every penny I could. 6 months into van life, I landed a major contract with a tech startup. They needed a complete brand overhaul, and I poured everything I had into the project. It was the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. The startup loved my work so much that they offered me a full-time position as their creative director, complete with a substantial salary and benefits. But I had bigger plans. I used the money from that contract to start my own design agency. I worked out of my van for another 6 months, using coffee shops and co-working spaces for client meetings. Every dollar I earned went back into the business or into my savings. The business grew steadily but surely. By month 8, I had hired my first employee, a talented junior designer named Marcus. Within 14 months, I had added another designer and a part-time project manager. I was still living in my van, but now it was by choice rather than necessity. I had enough money for an apartment, but I was focused on a bigger goal. My first major breakthrough came when a Fortune 500 company reached out to me directly. They had seen my work with a tech startup and wanted me to rebrand their entire product line. The initial meeting was held at their corporate headquarters, where I arrived in business attire with my portfolio, having parked my van several blocks away. The contract was worth $180,000, more than I had ever imagined possible, and it opened doors I never knew existed. Working with such a high-profile client meant I needed to upgrade my professional presentation. I started renting conference rooms at business centers for important meetings and invested in professional lighting for video calls, a high-end laptop, and even a portable printer. My van became a sophisticated mobile workspace, but I was careful to maintain professional boundaries with clients. The success story spread through industry networks, and soon I was getting calls from marketing directors who wanted to work with the designer who had built her business through pure determination. What my family saw as a mark of failure had become my unique selling point in the business world. During one particularly memorable client meeting at a rented conference room, the CEO of a mid-sized company asked me about my business philosophy. When I explained my approach, carefully omitting the family drama, he was impressed by my resourcefulness and determination. "You know what sets you apart?" he said, signing a contract worth $85,000. "You understand what it means to build something from nothing. Most designers I meet have never faced real adversity. They can't relate to businesses that are fighting to survive and grow." That perspective became my competitive advantage. I specialized in working with companies that were going through transitions, startups that needed to establish credibility, and established businesses that wanted to reinvent themselves. My own transformation story resonated with clients who were going through their own changes. By month 16, I was turning down projects because I was fully booked. I hired a third designer and made my project manager full-time, bringing my team to 4 people total including myself. We all worked remotely, communicating through video calls and shared workspaces, creating a distributed team that was more efficient than most traditional agencies. During this entire time, my family continued their pattern of cruel comments and dismissive attitudes. They had no idea how successful I was becoming. To them, I was still the failure living in a van, and they seemed to take pleasure in that perception. The contrast between my professional life and my family relationships became increasingly stark. During the day, I was managing million-dollar accounts and being courted by major corporations. In the evenings, I would receive text messages from my mother asking if I had found a real job yet or calls from my sister wondering if I was ready to admit this whole thing was a mistake. One evening, while I was parked outside a client's office building after a particularly successful presentation, my father called. "Elena, your mother and I have been talking," he said in that condescending tone I had grown to hate. "We're worried that you're getting too comfortable with this vagrant lifestyle. Winter's coming, and living in a van is going to get dangerous." I looked around at the upscale business district where I was parked, then at my laptop screen showing the contract I had just signed for $150,000. "I'm doing fine, Dad," I said. "No, you're not," he insisted. "This is exactly what we were afraid would happen. You're getting stubborn about admitting you made a mistake. Pride comes before a fall, Elena. The longer you wait to get a real job and a real place to live, the harder it's going to be to explain this gap in your resume." "What gap?" I asked. "The gap where you were homeless instead of working," he said matter-of-factly. "No respectable employer is going to hire someone who chose to live in a van instead of taking responsibility for their life." I almost laughed out loud. At that moment, I had more money in my business account than my parents had in their retirement savings. I was employing 4 people and had a waiting list of clients who wanted to work with me. But to my father, I was still just a homeless person making excuses. "I really have to go, Dad," I said. "Think about what I said, Elena. We're your family, and we love you, but we can't watch you destroy your life like this forever. There comes a point where even family has to step back and let someone face the consequences of their choices." After that call, I made a decision that would prove crucial later. I started documenting everything more systematically. I began saving screenshots of my bank statements, copying emails from high-profile clients, and taking photos of myself at prestigious business locations. I wasn't sure why I was doing it at first, but something told me I might need proof of my success someday. I also started reaching out to other professionals who had unconventional backgrounds. I found a network of entrepreneurs who had built successful businesses after experiencing homelessness, bankruptcy, or other major life setbacks. We met monthly at a coffee shop downtown, sharing strategies and supporting each other's growth. Through this network, I met Jennifer, a woman who had started a consulting firm after losing her house in a divorce. She had built her business while living in extended stay motels and eventually became one of the most respected business consultants in the city. The thing people don't understand, Jennifer told me over coffee one evening, is that adversity can be an incredible teacher. When you've lost everything once, you never take success for granted. You work harder, you're more creative, and you appreciate every victory. Her words resonated deeply with me. I realized that my family's rejection, while painful, had freed me from their limitations and expectations. I wasn't trying to live up to anyone else's definition of success, I was creating my own. Around month 18, I received an unexpected opportunity. A national business magazine wanted to feature me in an article about unconventional entrepreneurs. The journalist was fascinated by my story and wanted to do a full photo shoot. "Your story is exactly what our readers want to hear," she explained during our initial interview. "You're proof that success isn't about following traditional paths. You're proof that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining everything." The article was scheduled to run in 4 months, and I knew it would dramatically increase my profile in the business world. But it also meant that my success would become much more public. I realized that my family would eventually find out exactly how wrong they had been about me. As I planned for that revelation, I also began seriously looking for property. I had been living in the van for nearly 2 years, and while it had served me well, I needed a permanent base of operations. I wanted a home office where I could meet with local clients, a space where my team could gather for strategy sessions, and most importantly, a place that would represent everything I had built. The house hunting process was both exciting and surreal. Real estate agents would meet me at coffee shops, initially uncertain about my ability to qualify for a mortgage, then stunned when they saw my financial statements showing over $400,000 in business accounts. I was pre-approved for loans up to $650,000. I looked at dozens of properties over 3 months, but I knew I would recognize the right one when I saw it. I wanted something that would be undeniably impressive, something that would make an unmistakable statement about how far I had come. About 22 months after I'd started living in the van, I found the perfect property. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom craftsman house in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. The house had been on the market for a while because it needed some work, but I could see its potential. More importantly, at $485,000, I could afford it with a substantial down payment. I made an offer that same day. 3 weeks later, I was holding the keys to my own home. Not renting, not staying with family, but owning. I stood in the empty living room, looking out at the large windows that filled the space with natural light, and felt a sense of accomplishment I'd never experienced before. But I wasn't done yet. I spent the next 8 months renovating the house. I hired licensed electricians and plumbers for the technical work, but I did learn basic carpentry, painting, and design coordination. I managed every aspect of the renovation, often working alongside the contractors to stretch my budget and ensure every detail was perfect. The house became my masterpiece, a reflection of everything I'd learned and accomplished. The finished product was stunning. The kitchen had custom cabinets and high-end appliances. The living room featured exposed beams and a gorgeous stone fireplace. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet and an ensuite bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. The backyard was landscaped with a deck, garden, and even a small pond. I documented the entire renovation process, and when the business magazine article was finally published featuring my story, the response was overwhelming. The article showcased both my business success and my beautiful home renovation. My business exploded as people saw what I was capable of creating. I was featured in several home design magazines and even got a spot on a local morning show. Throughout all of this, I still hadn't told my family about my success. They continued to call occasionally, always with the same condescending tone, always assuming I was still struggling in my van. I let them believe it because I was planning something special. The revelation came about 2.5 years after I'd started living in the van, now 6 months after I'd finished the renovation and been living in my beautiful home. My business was thriving, I was living in my dream house, and I had enough money in the bank to feel truly secure. I decided it was time to let my family know exactly how wrong they'd been about me. I invited them all to what I called a family dinner at my address. I was deliberately vague about the details, simply telling them I had something important to share. They agreed to come, probably expecting some kind of apology or admission of defeat. The day of the dinner, I prepared everything carefully. I cooked an elaborate meal using my high-end kitchen appliances, set the table with expensive dinnerware, and made sure every detail of the house was perfect. I even parked my van in the garage, planning to show them later how I transformed it into a comfortable mobile office. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, I took a deep breath and opened the door. My parents and Tessa stood on my front porch, looking confused and slightly annoyed. "Elena, whose house is this?" My mother Marjorie asked immediately. "Are you house-sitting for someone? Because if you're pretending to live somewhere fancy just to impress us, that's really pathetic." "Please, come in," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. They walked into the foyer, and I watched their faces as they took in the beautiful hardwood floors, the custom lighting, and the view into the open-concept living area. "Seriously, Elena, what is this?" my father Harold demanded. "Whose house are you borrowing? And why does it smell like someone's been cooking? Are the actual owners here?" "This is my house," I said simply. "I own it." The silence that followed was deafening. They stood there, looking around at the expensive furnishings and professional design, clearly struggling to process what I just told them. "That's impossible," Tessa finally said. "You live in a van. You're unemployed. You can't afford rent, let alone a house like this." I pulled out my phone and showed them the property deed with my name on it. Then I showed them photos of the renovation process, the before and after shots, and finally, some recent screenshots of my business accounts. "I've been running my own design agency for over 2 years," I explained. "I'm the creative director for several major companies, and I've been featured in national magazines. I bought this house 18 months ago and renovated it myself." The look on their faces was everything I'd hoped for and more. Harold's mouth was literally hanging open. Marjorie was staring at the custom kitchen island as if it might disappear. Tessa was scrolling through the photos on my phone with a look of complete disbelief. But you were living in a van," Marjorie stammered. "You were homeless. You were a failure." "I was living in a van because my family told me I belonged on the streets," I said calmly. "I was living in a van because the people who were supposed to support me decided I wasn't worth helping. And yes, I lived in that van for over a year, but I used that time to build something amazing." I gave them a tour of the house, watching as they slowly realized the magnitude of what I'd accomplished. Every room was a testament to my success, from the home office where I ran my business to the guest bedrooms that I designed for the family I hoped to have someday. When we sat down for dinner, the dynamic had completely shifted. Suddenly, they were all interested in my work, my success, and my future plans. The same people who had mocked me and told me I deserved to be homeless were now trying to act like proud family members. "We always knew you had it in you," my father said, cutting into the expensive steak I prepared. "We just wanted to push you to reach your potential." The tough love approach, my mother agreed. It clearly worked. Tessa was quieter, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She kept looking around the house, and I knew she was calculating its value. I played along for the evening, accepting their retroactive support and pretending to believe their revisionist history. But I was already planning my next move. Over the following months, my family's attitude toward me changed completely. The magazine article had been shared widely, and several of their friends had seen it and congratulated them on my success. Suddenly, they couldn't maintain the illusion that I was still a failure living in a van. They started calling regularly, always wanting to know about my business and my life. They began inviting me to family gatherings again, introducing me to their friends as their successful daughter and successful sister. But I wasn't fooled. I could see the calculations in their eyes every time they looked at my house. I knew exactly what they were thinking, and I was proven right about 8 months after the initial family dinner. It started with Tessa calling me on a Tuesday evening. "Elena, I have some exciting news," she said, her voice full of fake enthusiasm. "Jake and I are expecting our second baby." Tessa had gotten married to Jake 3 years earlier, and they had a 2-year-old daughter named Lily. I congratulated her, genuinely happy despite our complicated relationship. "Thank you," she said. "Actually, that's kind of why I'm calling. We're going to need more space, and our current place is just too small for a family of 4. We've been looking at houses, but everything in our price range is either too small or in terrible neighborhoods." I could see where this was heading, but I let her continue. "We were thinking," she went on, "that maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement. Your house is so big, and you're just one person. It seems like such a waste of space." "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, though I already knew. "Well, you have 4 bedrooms, and we really only need 2. Maybe we could move in with you? We could split the utilities and help with the upkeep. It would be perfect for everyone." I told her I'd think about it, but I already knew my answer. I also knew this was just the beginning. Sure enough, over the next few weeks, I started getting calls from my parents as well. They had apparently heard about Tessa's brilliant idea and wanted to add their support. It makes perfect sense, my mother Marjorie said during one of our conversations. Family should help family, and you have so much space. Besides, it would be good for you to have people around. Living alone in such a big house must be lonely. Tessa really deserves this opportunity, my father Harold added during his call. She's been working so hard as a mother, and Jake's been struggling to find better employment. This could be the fresh start they need. I continued to play along, acting like I was seriously considering their proposal. But I was actually documenting everything. I started recording our phone conversations, legally, since I live in a one-party consent state, and saving all their text messages and voicemails. The pressure intensified over the following month. Tessa started sending me listings of houses she claimed to be looking at, all of them obviously inferior to mine. She would call me crying about how stressed she was about finding a place before the baby arrived. My parents started making subtle comments about how disappointed they were that I wasn't being more helpful to my sister. Then came the ultimatum. Elena, my mother said during a phone call, we need to talk seriously about this situation with Tessa. She's your sister, and she's pregnant. If you don't let her move in with you, we're going to have to seriously reconsider our relationship with you. What do you mean? I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. I mean that we can't support a daughter who won't help her own family in a time of need. We've been so proud of how you've turned your life around, but this is showing us that you haven't really changed. You're still the same selfish person who ended up living in a van. That night, I made my decision. I called Tessa and told her that I had thought about her proposal and that I wanted to discuss it in person. I invited the whole family over for dinner that Sunday to talk about the details. They were thrilled. Tessa called me 3 times that week to thank me, to start planning how they would arrange their belongings in our house. My parents called to tell me how proud they were that I was finally acting like a real family member. Sunday arrived, and I prepared for what would be the most satisfying dinner of my life. I cooked another elaborate meal, set the table beautifully, and made sure every detail was perfect. I also set up a small recording device in the dining room, hidden behind a decorative plant. When they arrived, Tessa was practically glowing with excitement. She had brought fabric samples and paint swatches, apparently planning to redecorate the rooms they would be occupying. I thought we could make the front bedroom into a nursery, she said, spreading her materials out on my dining room table. And Lily could have the room next to it. Jake and I would take the master bedroom, obviously, since we're a couple and you're just, single. Obviously, I agreed, smiling. My parents were equally enthusiastic. They spent the cocktail hour walking around the house, pointing out changes they thought would make it more family-friendly. You'll probably want to convert your home office into a playroom, my mother Marjorie suggested. Tessa's kids are going to need space to play, and you can always work from the kitchen table. The backyard could use a swing set, my father Harold added. And maybe we should fence in that pond. It's not safe for little ones. Throughout dinner, they continued to make plans for my house as if it were already theirs. Tessa talked about hosting family gatherings and how nice it would be to have a proper home for her children. My parents discussed how they could help with babysitting and how convenient it would be to have everyone under one roof. Finally, as we were finishing dessert, Tessa brought up the timeline. So, we're thinking we could move in next weekend, she said casually. Jake's already given notice at our apartment, and we've started packing. We figured there's no point in waiting, especially since you have so much extra space. Next weekend? I repeated. Well, yes, my mother Marjorie said. Tessa's pregnancy is progressing, and she needs to get settled before the baby arrives. Plus, it's silly for her to keep paying rent on that tiny apartment when she could be living here. It's perfect for a growing family, my father Harold added. And like your mother said, she needs this space more than a single person. I looked around the table at my family, these people who had told me I deserved to be homeless, who had mocked me and humiliated me, who had shown me no support when I needed it most. Now they were sitting in my house, eating my food and making plans to take over my life. I smiled sweetly at all of them. That sounds wonderful, I said. Let me just make a quick phone call to confirm the arrangements. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, I'd like to report a trespassing situation. I have people in my home who are refusing to leave and are making threats about moving in without my permission. The silence around my dinner table was absolute. Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? The dispatcher asked. Not immediate danger, but they're becoming increasingly aggressive about their demands to take over my property. Elena, what are you doing? Tessa hissed. I held up a finger to silence her and continued talking to the dispatcher. They've been pressuring me for weeks to let them move in, and tonight they informed me they're moving in next weekend whether I agree or not. They've already given notice at their current residence and are treating my home as if it belongs to them. Officers are on their way, ma'am. Can you safely separate yourself from these individuals? Yes, I can. Thank you. I hung up and looked at my family, all of whom were staring at me with expressions of shock and growing anger. Elena, have you lost your mind? My mother Marjorie demanded. We're your family. You're the family that told me I deserved to be homeless, I said calmly. You're the family that laughed at me while I lived in a van. You're the family that said failures end up where they belong. That was different, my father Harold said. We were trying to motivate you. No, you were being cruel, I replied. And now you want to take the house that I bought with my own money, that I renovated with my own hands, that I earned through my own hard work. You want to take it because you think I don't deserve it. Tessa needs this more than you do, my mother insisted. She has children. Tessa has children that she chose to have, I said. I have a house that I chose to buy. My choice doesn't become less valid because I'm single. Tessa was crying now, her face red with anger and embarrassment. You're being selfish, she sobbed. I'm your sister. I'm pregnant. How can you do this to me? How could you do what you did to me? I asked. How could you laugh at me when I was homeless? How could you put me on speakerphone so your friends could mock me? How could you tell me I was finally learning my real worth? The doorbell rang, and I went to answer it. 2 police officers stood on my front porch, and I invited them in. Ma'am, you called about a trespassing situation? Yes, officers. These people are my family members, and they've been pressuring me to let them move into my home. Tonight, they informed me that they're moving in next weekend without my permission. They've already terminated their lease elsewhere and are treating my property as if it belongs to them. I showed the officers my property deed and explained the situation. I also played them some of the recordings I'd made of my family's demands and threats. Folks, one of the officers said, turning to my family, this is a private residence, and the owner has made it clear that you're not welcome to move in. If you continue to pressure her or attempt to move in without permission, you could be charged with harassment and trespassing. But she's our daughter. My mother protested. Our sister. This is a family matter. Ma'am, family relationship doesn't give you the right to someone else's property, the officer explained. If the homeowner doesn't want you living here, that's her legal right. The officers took everyone's information and made it clear that any further attempts to pressure me about the house would result in formal charges. They also warned my family that showing up uninvited would be considered trespassing. After the police left, my family sat in my living room, looking stunned and defeated. I can't believe you called the police on us, Tessa said quietly. I can't believe you thought you could just take my house, I replied. We weren't taking it, my father said. We were trying to help you understand that family comes first. Family does come first, I agreed. That's why I expected my family to support me when I needed help. Instead, you told me I deserved to be homeless. You mocked me and humiliated me. You made it clear that I was worthless in your eyes. We've apologized for that, my mother said weakly. No, you haven't, I said. You've tried to rewrite history by claiming it was tough love. You've never actually apologized for the cruel things you said and did. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the beautiful neighborhood I now called home. I want you all to leave now, I said. And I want you to understand that this house, this life, this success, I built it all without you. I built it despite you. I built it because you told me I couldn't. Elena, please, Tessa said, standing up. I'm pregnant. We really do need help. And I really needed help 3 years ago, I replied. But you told me I deserved to be on the streets. You told me failures end up where they belong. You told me I was finally learning my real worth. I turned to face them all. Well, I did learn my real worth. I learned that I'm worth more than any of you ever imagined. I learned that I'm capable of amazing things when I'm not being held back by people who don't believe in me. I learned that I don't need family members who only love me when I'm successful. They left that night, and I haven't heard from them since. Tessa and Jake found an apartment in their budget, and they're managing just fine. My parents occasionally send text messages asking if I'm ready to work things out, but I don't respond. I'm still living in my beautiful house, still running my successful business, and still driving my van occasionally when I want to travel. I've filled my life with people who supported me from the beginning, people who believed in me even when I was living in a vehicle and showering at the gym. The house that my family wanted to take over has become exactly what I dreamed it would be. I host dinner parties for my real friends, I have a home office where I create amazing work for my clients, and I have a guest room for the people who actually deserve to stay in my home. Sometimes I think about that night when my family sat around my dinner table, making plans to take over my life. I think about how entitled they felt, how certain they were that I owed them something because we shared DNA. But mostly, I think about how satisfying it was to prove them wrong. They said I belonged on the streets, that I was a failure, that I was finally learning my real worth. They were right about one thing: I did learn my real worth. I learned that I'm worth so much more than they ever gave me credit for. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, in a house that you bought with your own money, surrounded by people who love you for who you are, not for what you can give them. The van is parked in a storage unit nearby, converted now into a mobile office for when I want to work from different locations. Sometimes I visit it and remember those difficult months, the fear and uncertainty, the cold nights and the constant worry about where I would park safely. But I also remember the determination, the fire that burned inside me every time my family made another cruel comment. I remember the satisfaction of landing that first big contract, the pride of buying my first house, the joy of creating something beautiful with my own hands. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about failure. Instead, they taught me about resilience, about the power of proving people wrong, and about the importance of choosing your own family. My house is perfect, but not for my sister's growing family. It's perfect for me, and for the life I built from nothing, one day at a time, one success at a time, one sweet moment of revenge at a time. The police report from that night is framed in my home office, a reminder of the moment I finally stood up to the people who tried to tear me down. Next to it is a photo of me standing in front of my house on the day I bought it, holding the keys and smiling wider than I ever had before. They said failures end up where they belong. They were absolutely right. I ended up exactly where I belong, in a beautiful house that I earned, surrounded by success that I built, living a life that I chose. And they ended up exactly where they belong too, on the outside, looking in, realizing too late that they underestimated the daughter and sister they threw away. The best part is that I did it all without them. Every achievement, every success, every moment of triumph, I earned it on my own terms, with my own hands, through my own determination. When I look back on that phone call 3 years ago, when my mother told me that some people just don't deserve better than the streets, I smile. She was wrong about who didn't deserve better. But she was absolutely right about one thing: some people really don't deserve better than the streets. The difference is, it wasn't me.